and everybody should see that message.
Okay, we're good. Okay, and Kashvi is here.
Oh, wonderful. Then we'll go ahead with the plan as.
Welcome, Kashvi.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Kashvi. We're just getting started.
Okay,
Welcome,
perfect.
Jenna.
Hello, I'm Cathy Hailey, Vice President of the Northern Region of the Poetry Society of Virginia. And manning the chat and Zoom, we have Steve Booker of the North Central Region. We'll be alternating these roles each month. We are continuing our series with a new focus, but still celebrating PSV's centennial year with monthly readings called Virginia Voices. The intention is to remember why we came together in PSV in the first place, to share how we as individuals approach poetry, and to connect with our community statewide. In this new year, our goal is to bring together the poetic voices of established poets and youth or young adult poets, beginning with our young poets in the community who are new PSV members. Episodes featuring 2 PSV members are held on Zoom at 5:30 p.m. on the second Wednesday of each month. We ask the same 3 questions and ask featured poets to read 3 poems. Today, we feature 2 poets laureate. Zeina Azzam is a Palestinian-American poet, writer, and editor, and the Poet Laureate of Alexandria, Virginia for 2022 to 2025. She is the author of Some Things Never Leave You, forthcoming in July 2023 by Tiger Bark Press, and the chapbook Baina Baina In Between, The Poetry Box 2021. Her website is www.zainaazzam.com. Kashvi Ramani is a 17-year-old from Northern Virginia and the inaugural 2023 to 2024 Virginia Youth Poet Laureate. She is the co-head of the Poetry Club, as well as the head of the literary magazine at her school. She was a Virginia Young Poet in the Community in 2021-2022. And she's also been a winner in the Poetry Society of Virginia's student contest. Okay, Kashvi, I'm going to ask you to start us out by presenting your first poem.
Sounds good. So I would love to present a poem called My Thud in a Day. It's actually what ended up winning me like the title of Virginia Youth Poet Laureate. And it's one of my personal favorite poems, and one that you've heard before, Ms. Hailey. But
that's okay.
Dada basically means grandmother in my language, and this poem is for not only my grandmother, but grandmothers in India and women in India in particular, and the role that they're supposed to play in the family versus how it translates for them on a daily basis. When the clouds part, my grandmother is on the move. Her locks flap in the wind. She hides the flaps on her skin. She always finds a way to burrow inside herself, to position her limbs in the shadows of the sun. She runs faster each time reality catches up. When India rises from its trout-lipped slumber, her basket is already filled with buds. Jasmine sugarcoats her strained smile. She'll have to fix that by noon, and prepares to string itself to garlands. Dada works its milky color to a lather, scrubbing until a bumpy rash of rose envelops her brown. Not cream. She'll try again tomorrow. At 11, she bustles down flights of stairs until the salt that drips from her face is enough seasoning, until the blood that hides her hand washes over with henna, tinges the dough sindoor colored. So she sweeps a mark across her forehead and prays, clasps her hands together and asks for a new face. When the clock finally chimes noon, she dons 4 tiffins of lunch and wears a crimson sari to wash out the weakness. Her feet are quick, but her husband's are quicker. When he's through, Her wavering teeth, more ocean than stronghold, attack their own hands over and over and recrudescent waves over and 3 p.m. And she practices teetering spoons on her palms to prepare for the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her daughter-in-law grows grayer and frailer by the day, men like a little meat on the bones, more cooking for Dada. Her niece, who once painted the solar system on her eyelids, let her planets get lost on Earth. The ones who aren't pretty have to be smart because Dada can't marry them off right away. And her daughter, who runs at the same time as she does every morning to connect with the life she once knew, shuffles down gated neighborhoods in neon Adidas while Dada turns around to watch for hungry eyes in sandals that peel at the heels. The nightjar sings in tune with her landline. Quiet, subliminal darkness unfolds the cloak of nighttime, but 13,000 miles away, me and my sister are greeting the sun. We prattle about carnivals and tank tops, about new dreams and opportunities, about our goals and our lives. Dada, when are you coming to see us? Soon, Bangaru, soon. And then she tucks herself in with a blanket that steams like rice and dreams her wishes into our realities. Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous. And there's so much to listen to in your poem that it doesn't matter if I heard it before. I wrote down just a few lines that I loved. Positioning her limbs in the shadows of the sun. Jasmine sugarcoats her strained smile. Wears a crimson sari to wash out the weakness. More ocean than stronghold. Her niece, who once painted the solar system on her forehead. I stopped after that, but all gorgeous lines. Thank you so much. So, Kashvi, now that you've read that poem, and I know that it will feed into the answer to the question about poetry that we're asking, can you share with us your personal approach to poetry? Think about what you want us to understand better about you and your work as a poet.
I think that this is best kind of defined by my start in poetry, which I kind of got poetry from a different source than I think most people in the area. Whereas like instead of, reading poetry anthologies, starting with Shel Silverstein, I was kind of thrust into like the slam poetry world. I saw like a lot of open mics at places like Busboys and Poets in DC, and like the power behind their words and the way that they're writing as if they're just talking and like rapping at the same time was always like the strongest form of poetry to me, like personally for me to present. Being a performer first, I've been acting all my life. And I think that in writing my poems, I write it with that in mind. I want it to feel like I'm talking to someone, and I want to always perform the way that I would speak it, just a little more rhythmically. And so a lot of the times when I start writing my work, I'll read every single line out loud in my head to see how it flows, because I know at some point I'm going to want to present this, put this on YouTube, do it for some sort of performance venue of some sort. And even like the really little poems that are meant to be like on websites and that kind of thing, I try my best to work in that like rhythmic element that connects back to like my slam poetry roots, because I think all poetry should be performed. But some poetry in particular is best performed in that style. And I think a lot of my work is.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I first met you, you were performing at the Poetry Museum on the sort of DC Maryland line there. And you were, in front of both Zeina and myself, actually. We went there together to watch the performance and see who was going to be crowned. And at that point, it was a beautiful performance and we really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so glad that you guys came to watch. And it's been so strange meeting people that, again, that I've like seen in the past and like a whole different realm of the arts. Like a lot of the poets that I still know today, I met originally in like 2019 through like the DC Youth Slam team, and now like we're all youth poet laureates like working together. I saw one of my good friends, Amasa, last night at like an Arlington anthology reading.
Yeah.
And it's just so nice to see like how the community comes together in whatever events that we're doing.
Right. That was a great event I wanted to attend, but I was unable to because of a conflict. But I want you all to know about Holly Petkova's project that presented an anthology of youth voices, young adult voices from the Arlington area at the library last night. And you can still purchase a copy of that if you're interested. If you can't find it on your own, let me know and I will help you find it.
Yes, it's just an incredible collection of youth voices. Me, Amasa, and another poetry ambassador, Liam Mason, were the editors for the book. So it was incredible to see like all these youth voices from like poetry, starting from like Shakespearean sonnets all the way to like free verse. It was just such a good collection of work. Yeah.
And Holly's finishing her term as Poet Laureate of Arlington, and this was financed, I guess, through a grant she got from the American Academy of Poetry, of Poets. So that was tremendous that she was able to get that as her part of her Poet Laureate project. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to turn to Zeina now. Zeina, would you share your first poem with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And first, I'd like to just really thank you, Cathy and Steve, for organizing this. This is what an honor to be on this as part of Virginia Voices, and also to be with sharing it with Kashvi. I'm so proud of you, Kashvi. I'm happy to see this young cohort of poets that's coming up and growing and being part of our community. It's really lovely. The poem I have chosen to read tonight is from my chapbook, Beina Beina in Between. It's titled Immigrant. And those of you who know me, my parents were refugees, and we immigrated to the United States when I was 10 years old from the Middle East. My family is Palestinian. And so this is a kind of a retrospective poem about my experience. It's titled Immigrant. I grew up eating cheese with bitter olives, sesame and thyme-infused olive oil on warm bread. Names in my family all meant something, like lifelong challenges. Zeina, beautiful; Bahij, splendid; Fatih, victorious; Samih, forgiving. In my childhood books, words flowed from right to left. Direction didn't matter then. At 10, we traveled east to west against time. I gained 7 hours of youth, lost my compass. In New York, no sea to swallow the sun each day. Foods were sweet in America. People spoke as fast as they walked. Everything was large: washing machines, supermarkets, even bananas and red grapes. We settled in this vast, cold place with neither boots nor a sense of how to be warm. Snowfalls were beautiful and cruel. The freezing air slapped our faces each morning. Inside, there was the smell of garlic and onions on the stove, loud talking over the phone with relatives overseas. My family inhaled and exhaled politics like cigarettes all the time. We blamed the British, the Americans, Arab leaders, Zionists, communists, or a history that was simply unkind. The TV in the background reported news in a language we spoke but did not really understand. All this over a good meal, always, as if the hunger was in our bellies and not in our hearts.
Thank you so much, Zeina. I love the way that ends with the belly compared to the heart, and it really hits home.
Thank you.
And I love the way that you've infused so many different tastes and smells of culture, of food, and that poem and other poems that I know of yours. Um, but in this one, I really liked that. Well, there was the line about swallowing the sun, but I didn't get all the details. And then this, we settled in the vast cold place with neither boots nor a sense of how to be warm. I just thought that was an incredible way of really communicating an idea to us.
Hmm.
And also the inhaling and exhaling of politics like cigarettes and the litany of people that are to blame. Such a great cataloging.
Thank you,
Beautiful
Cathy.
poem.
Thank you for pulling out these particular
Absolutely.
things about my poem. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
And I've heard this poem before, and I've read it in your book, but like it's funny how different times, you don't always zero in on the same images. When each time you hear it or read it, something else might catch you.
Yeah, and I decided recently to add the names of my family members. That's actually not in the poem that was published. When I say what their names meant, and as if they are lifelong challenges, I thought, oh, that'd be a nice thing, a touch to actually add the real Arabic names to that part.
Well, I enjoyed that, and I also wanted to note the connection between the two of you incorporating some of a second language into your poetry, but in ways that you could follow it very easily. And I like to do that too with my Greek heritage as well.
Yeah.
Zeina, can you talk to us about your personal approach to poetry and what you'd like us to know about who you are as a poet?
Sure. I really thought about this question. It's a really important one. And I kind of boiled down to first thinking, why do I write poetry? Why do we all write poetry? And so I thought that, through poetry, we express our feelings about challenges in life. We connect to something deeper in ourselves. And it's also a way to connect with others. So I think of it that way, so that, on issues that are important to all of us. Poetry is also a way to raise awareness about particular issues. And for me, talking about my family, I realized that I bring awareness about what refugees feel and what immigrants feel, right? And it's also a way to galvanize people to act. There have been so many, poems that do that. And actually in the Arab world, during the Arab Spring, there was a Tunisian poet from the early 20th century. Some words from his poem were written all over across the whole Arab world about, when people want to rise up. So these were poetic lines that people were using. So this kind of shows how poetry galvanizes people. And I think also for me, poetry gives me sort of this permission to go into that vulnerable space, that space of thinking about, what's important to me and what scares me, what makes me wonder, what I love. And it's kind of a safe place, right? Poetry, to go there through poetry. In terms of my process, I don't have a daily practice like a lot of people do. I kind of wish I did, but I don't. I kind of know myself. I just wait until something really inspires me, and then I start writing a poem. But once I start writing it, then it becomes an obsession. It's like I have to keep going back to it all the time. And of course, I write and rewrite a lot. Most lines don't come the way I really want them from the beginning. So I'm constantly, rewriting and editing and, crafting. But I've learned early on that I need to be patient with myself, that I can't think that I'm going to write a poem and have it be ready tomorrow. I feel like even if I feel like it's ready tomorrow, I feel like within the next few days after, I go back to it and I really want to hone what I've already done.
I agree with that so much, because sometimes you want to celebrate in that moment because you're so glad you got to that point that you did. but a couple days later, it's just not where you thought it was.
And you send it to somebody, you know, you want them to read it and then like you regret that it would have been much better if I waited a couple of
Yes.
days. So what inspires me are, of course, my own personal life and my history and my family. And, you know, because we have this narrative of being refugees and immigrants in my family, that displacement and identity issues really figures into how I look at the world and how I connect with the world. I mean, I don't have a unique story. There are lots of refugees in the world. There are lots of people who have immigrated and who have been displaced. But this makes me connected to all of these people, you know. I often, and I know Sally does this because Sally and I are in a monthly poetry group. I often, when I'm watching the news or reading the paper, I pull out little quotes and I hold on to them, and, you know, I might be inspired on the spot to write something, or I just hold on to them and they become sort of an epigraph for a poem later on. So I've also, you know, people say things that I catch, and so I want to catch them into a poem as well. I have a lot of poems about grief and loss. You know, when I lost my parents, I've written poems about them, and I like to address those kinds of poems to the person whom I've lost, which is, I think it helps me. There's something therapeutic about that. And like you mentioned, Cathy, I like to write about food. I like to include food in stuff that I write, and you know, food is such a big part of culture, and it just serves as a beautiful metaphor for so many things. I don't want to go on and on, but I do want to talk a little bit about what being poet laureate means in terms of writing the poetry. Should I talk about that now, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, you know, of course, I'm so honored to be serving as a poet laureate of Alexandria, and it's just been a really incredible experience. So part of being a poet laureate in Alexandria is I'm asked to write specific poems for commemorations or particular occasions. And I think I find this very challenging but really fulfilling if I end up coming up with something that I'm happy with. But that is something that has been a real growth experience for me as a poet. I've had to write for historic commemorations, particularly for Alexandria's two documented lynchings. We have two lynchings from the 1890s. And the city commemorates these lynchings, you know, simply to commemorate them, but also to use the opportunity to educate people, raise awareness about, you know, this terrible history that we have. But I also, you know, I have to write a poem for the Jazz Festival by the river. I have to write a poem for Alexandria's 274th birthday, which is coming up next month. So some of these are more sort of, you know, upbeat kinds of poems. So that's been really, really wonderful, but as I said, a real growth experience. And lastly, I'd like to just mention something about this haiku project that I've embarked upon. I and a small business in Old Town, Alexandria, it's actually a yoga studio. We applied for funding from the city. They have funding for collaborations between artists and businesses. And so we got a very small grant to do a haiku project. And the project includes, first we had a couple of workshops for the community, and now we have a contest, and we're asking people in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area to send haiku with the theme, Our Natural World. And then after we have judges who will choose 12 haiku that we will put on, they're like yard signs. And so we're going to put them throughout the city. And I'm just so excited about that, because that's really like public poetry, public haiku, and people who are just going about their business in life just will see, you know, haiku around them. It's just so lovely. We'll have a celebration of the winners and others. And then in the fall, I'm going to put together a small booklet the winning haiku and some other ones as well. So we'll have a tangible memento of this whole project. So anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit
That's
about
wonderful.
that.
And if any of you have questions about those things, I have some of the details, or I can put you in touch with Zeina's Poet Laureate email.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I went on, but I wanted
It's
to.
okay. I know you
cover
had
all this.
more to say about this question than the others. So
Yes.
Kashvi, you're invited to give us your second poem.
Sounds good. I wanted to say I loved everything that you said, Mrs. Azzam. I think that really touched me and related to what I said. And yeah, shout out to whoever in the chat said poetry is therapy, because I don't know how to like messages, but I wanted to like that one. So pretend I did. But this second poem is a shorter one, a much, much newer one. And it's called Pink, but more specifically, I hate the color pink because I hate the color pink. And this is a poem about that. Oh. Okay. I hate the way pink lipstick sticks, too hard and permanent, staining surfaces with pale hearts and drawn pale smiles. Little girls match their lips to their hoop skirts, never touching net. They hop through chalk outlines where a body once rested, caked in rosy blusher that always washed me out. Little girls, because boys like them little better, are prettied before their funerals. With faces cast on TV screens, eager eyes, the dirt is disturbed. Missing bodies, missing pink hearts. Hallmark holidays cast their lives as memories. Pink heart cards echoed with happy anniversary beside my condolences. Everyone cares, but pews are filled with empty bodies. My pink is a little darker, something peppery and tangible, almost red. Like bloodlust and avenged deaths and anger. Not so pretty, not so little. Yeah, a shorter one.
Very nice. Pretty, so a darker look at pink than most people think of when they think of, what are little girls made of.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I like wanted to focus on like true crime and young women in true crime, because I'm a big true crime fanatic. I don't know if there's any more in the Zoom space, but a lot of the times people hyperfixate on like pretty little girls, and it is kind of amplified, like the media obsession with like pretty young girls. And a lot of the time it becomes to like an obsession and this alongside like this expectation that little girls are supposed to like live up to, even in their death. Like true crimers still have something to say about little girls constantly. And I guess I just wanted to write like a poem about that, because I don't feel like there's like poetry about that out there.
Definitely. It's a good example to share with people, especially students who think poetry is only about flowers and
right.
Positive things. Thank you. And your coming to Poetry Society of Virginia is a little different. And, with the young poets in the community, we're going to ask you to talk about, because we've just granted you membership to PSV as a part of being a young poet in the community. But your connection with PSV started before that, at least with the contest. And I know Zeina and I talked about it when we met you the first time, when we saw you in the poets at the Poetry Museum. So talk to us about your connection with PSV and also your Young Poet in the Community project.
My connection with PSV has been long running, because I made a decision a couple of years ago that I was going to be like a good poet instead of just a poet for myself. And I think for me, usually because I'm a very driven person, that's usually a stark transition. When I want to do something, I kind of like put everything into it, which is why I'm here today. And PSV was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to look at this Poetry Foundation and enter all the contests that I can. And I ended up winning one, which was so exciting. So I entered the next year and then I won again. And it was really exciting to like have this like connection to this organization without, actually being a part of it. And I'm really grateful to have met you both within it, and for you to have seen like performances since then. I kept in touch and everything, and I think that like now it's just very strengthening to know that instead of being kind of on the outskirts, winning the competitions within PSV, I'm a part of the community now. So it's really important, as I was saying before, to know who your poetry people are, and to stay true to them, because those are the people that are going to be in your lives for life. And I think PSV is one of those organizations that will that has and will continue to support you throughout like whatever you do in writing and in poetry and performing. And that's why I'm so grateful to finally have been indoctrinated into the organization. And did you say you wanted me to talk about YPIC as well?
What you did for your poetry project, because most of the audience here, I don't think is necessarily aware of that.
Yeah, of course. As a young poet in the community with Missy Gloria, it was kind of a series of things that I did, but I would say my main event was this like poetry gathering. I wanted to call it like a more chilled out version of like a Busboys and Poets open mic that we had in a cafe. So I guess I could call it a poetry cafe, but it was for everyone in the county. And we had a pretty good showing, and essentially the like kind of show order was performances from a bunch of youth poet laureates, because we also made this kind of like group chat, built this kind of community, and I know a lot of the YPLs in the area very well. So the Maryland, the DC, the previous Arlington, a bunch of them came and performed some of their work. And that was followed by an open mic for anyone to be able to read their work in the audience. And then a little workshop run by the YPLs just for poetry writing and that kind of thing. And I think like having all three helped it to be kind of a progression. They could hear from poets and get inspiration from that. They could write work themselves using some sort of narrowed down prompt that we gave them, and kind of guidelines on how to write, because I always think writing with parameters in some way is what produces the best work, or at least gets the juices flowing, and then finally present the work that they made in that small space. So they left with something and came with like a little knowledge of what exactly they would be doing in that like space of time. So I loved the event because my county isn't at all engaged in poetry. Up in Northern Virginia, we're a really STEM-based county, and creative writing isn't very robust. So being able to have an event like this, hopefully that's like the front runner for more events of this kind, organized by me, organized by other passionate individuals. And I mean, it would just be really great to have more of a poetry foundation in the county. And that was essentially my goal in taking on this project. Yeah,
I think you were very successful with that, and I agree with you that really all it takes is one person at a time making a small difference locally to maybe have an influence that will impact more people as time goes on. So exactly. Wonderful. Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and ask you to talk about the last question. We usually like to end the event with wait, Zeina, you haven't done your second poem yet.
No, I haven't. Would you like me to do that?
It just occurred to me. Yes, Kashvi, pardon me. I'm going to go to Zeina to do her second poem, and then we'll come back to that question.
No worries.
Okay.
Thanks, Cathy. I thought I would share with you a poem that gives you an idea of the kinds of poems I write for the city of Alexandria. And this poem I actually read last year at the birthday party by the river, the 273rd birthday party of the city. And it's about diversity in the city. So it's called Like the Trees in Alexandria. The soil we stand on is packed with the history of growth, the biology of perseverance, as fertile and deep as our affinities to each other. This is where we start. It took us thousands of years to understand the community of trees in a forest, to listen to the way roots intertwine, communicate in safety underground. This is our language too, of carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus, as we construct infinite unseen pathways to share nutrients and water, stories and poetry and songs. These are our common roots. We are the trees of the forest, leafy and floral, coniferous, with flashy crowns or simple beauty. So many shades of green and brown, hues of loveliness. This diversity is our touchstone. Cypress, juniper, and palm, jasmine, and jacaranda. Many have traveled the world as flying seeds to land and regather and celebrate our homecoming. This is who we are. Our root systems teach us to behave as a single organism, to uplift all branches, young and old, she and he and they, watering and nourishing each other, safeguarding saplings against injustice. This is our presence and our legacy. We are the trees in Alexandria's florist.
Gorgeous. I think that in this case, even though this was a poem that was commissioned, that you made it your own. I see you in it so much, and I think that made it exceptionally, effective for the audience, because the audience can all relate.
Thank you. It's not always easy to find a metaphor that works, without going straight to what you want to say.
Yeah.
But I felt like the trees was a good one.
Absolutely. And this is just an aside for you and anybody else who hasn't seen it, but when Ada Limon did her live stream with the Library of Congress recently about her poem that's going to be etched on the spaceship to Europa, she had some interesting things to say about the struggle she had trying to write a commissioned poem. And I think anybody who might be challenged in that way would enjoy hearing the process.
I have to check that out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And Zeina, how did you come to PSV, and what have you found to be helpful to you through that organization?
Yeah, well, I learned about PSV initially from Mike Maggio, who was the VP of the Northern Region before you, Cathy. And I got connected to him through Grace Cavalieri, who's the Poet Laureate of Maryland, because she had interviewed both of us for the Library of Congress, and she thought she interviewed both of us and she wanted to connect us. So she wrote to both and introduce us, which was really lovely. And so we did have a good connection. And Mike sort of just generously brought me into the fold. And I'm just so grateful that he did that. He introduced me to a lot of poets in Northern Virginia, and involved me in some programs, and that kind of grew in different places. He did a few programs where he would connect poets with visual artists, and I really, benefited so much from those. And I really just got the sense, Mike made me feel like, every voice is important and every voice counts. And that really was such a lovely message from PSV for me. And then Cathy, you took over as vice president, and I continued this sort of wonderful association and involvement. I've attended, I'll say to everyone, I've attended many things that Cathy has organized, and we've attended some of them together. Like we attended Kashvi at one point, her performance. And we went to the luncheon in Williamsburg, the annual PSV luncheon there. I met a lot of people from different parts of the state and was exposed to new poets. And I went to the Little River Poetry Festival. That was awesome in Southern Virginia. And Cathy, I mean, I keep talking about you, Cathy, but you're figural in all of this too, just like Mike was before you. Cathy was one of my references when I applied for the poet laureate position. So I'm really grateful for that. And I've judged some poetry contests, the youth poetry contest in the annual PSV contest, and that's been really fulfilling for me. And I've been involved in other activities in the northern region. So
And when you judged, go ahead and say whose poem was one
Oh.
that you selected.
I selected Kashvi's poem, but didn't know it was written by her and didn't know I would be meeting her. I hoped I would meet her, but I was delighted that I selected her poem and that she became the Youth Poet Laureate. So this is really great.
Yes.
So anyway, and just generally, I feel like it's just been so lovely to be part of this, vibrant poetry community.
Absolutely. It's funny because I can relate to almost everything you were just talking about, and we actually met before I was vice president, but in
Mhm.
one of Mike's artist and writer connections. So
That's
that was
right.
very, very much fun. And I also will say that things you said about your individual poems that involve your individual heritage and all that, it absolutely connects with other people with other heritage, because
Mhm.
I've felt it myself, and I know that others do as well. Like you use the specifics of your own experience, but it resonates with people with all kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
so let's just go ahead and do the other question, because it's a follow-up with the PSV, and just, is there anything that you'd like to see PSV continue with, or start anew with, or any goals for the next 100 years of the Poetry Society of Virginia?
So do you want me to go first this time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if I can speak for the next 100 years, but I can speak,
No, just
for a couple of
whatever
ideas that
whatever
I
came to
have.
mind.
I mean, I think PSV is doing so many wonderful things, and I really enjoyed going to the conference this year. I went first 2 days and not the second 2 days, but I really felt like I got so much out of it. And I guess because of my background, my first inclination is to say I'd like to us to be more proactive about encouraging and supporting a diversity of poetic voices. I know we already have a lot of poets of color in the society and from different, cultural backgrounds, etc. But I just would like to strengthen that and to expand that community, to focus on them and organize activities around diverse poetry, whether it's everybody, the people themselves writing, or poetry that's already written, like to actually study it. Maybe we could have a special committee that has that as its mission, to make sure that these things happen. And I did an event in Alexandria in February, and it was about poetry about the moon. And you, Cathy, you came to it. And basically what I asked everybody is to find poems in other languages that have the moon as a theme, and to come and read these poems in those languages. And if there's a translation, that's great. If there's no translation, just give us a synopsis of what the poem is about. And the point is, to hear other languages, to hear poems from other languages, and to understand that a lot of the themes that we write about are themes from across the globe. I mean, everybody writes about the moon and the sun and so much more. And it was such a successful event. We had, like, I don't know, 75 people there or something, which is huge. It was in the little library in Northern Virginia. And people, we had, I think, 9 different languages, and not just French and Spanish, which was great, but we also had Hindi and Amharic and Arabic. I mean, there was lots of really wonderful connections that were made through that. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have something like that at the annual PSV conference? Always something multilingual like that. the other, if it's something, people are interested in, I certainly would be interested in it. My second idea is, I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's not a huge idea, but it would be really nice to have a list of all the poets laureate in Virginia. I mean, I'm constantly asking Cathy, who's the Loudoun County Poet Laureate? And she'll say, well, there isn't one. Cathy's so well connected, so I just go to her. But, it would be really nice for all of us to know who are the Poets Laureate in Virginia, and so we can connect with each other. I know, Cathy, you do the in the company of laureates each year, and you bring together all the laureates, but
every 2 years.
Every 2 years, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But it would be just nice to have that as a database, kind of as an updated database, and it would be great for all of us, the laureates, but also, when PSV has an event, all of us can tell our communities locally about it too. So it's a nice network that we should capitalize on.
Absolutely. I think that's an easy fix. I think we can do that. And I'll just say I'll get that started, because
Okay.
I'm working on, collecting all my, name changes so that I can invite them to October 7th and 8th in Prince William County in the Company of Laureates 2023. So
Mhm.
all of
That's
you are
great.
invited to that.
Yes, thank you. And the only other thing I wanted to say, and this is, I know this is an idea that's been worked on, and and that's just I'm thrilled that there's so much attention now on youth poets, and Kashvi really embodies that for us tonight, and all the poets that we can keep hearing about and keep hearing. It's just really wonderful. And Luisa Igloria's program, the project of Virginia Young Poets in the Community, has been such a wonderful, wonderful initiative. And it really, I think she's really a visionary in this. It's an incredible way to nurture these young poets and support them as they grow older and have these, as poets. And so we have this cohort that's working with us. So
Yeah.
I think that's really great.
Thank you. It's been an initiative for a while to get, more youth involved in PSV, and I think we're finally seeing the fruits of the labor. So it's really wonderful. Kashvi, so how about you? Tell us about your thoughts for the future of PSV from a young person's perspective.
Well, I'm going to say more youth involvement, but I think PSV does that very well, in the sense that, like, the competitions that you foster and the inclusivity in that sense is done really well. But I think that in PSV, I've kind of seen extremes. Like, I was a part of it when I first started, writing seriously in submitting to the competitions. And then once again, when I received this kind of high level position, but for the in-betweeners, some more advanced poets that want a chance to perform, to publish, to write in kind of a cohesive space. I don't know if there's as much of that within PSV. So kind of poetry for the masses would be a better way to engage more youth voices, because I think most people fall in that in between, in the sense that they're confident in performing, but it takes a lot to get to a title, kind of like a YPL kind of point. And not everyone, kind of strives for that, because maybe it's not what they're looking for, maybe they have different styles. But yeah, some engagement in that realm would definitely be really cool for PSV.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree with you. So, Kashvi, why don't you share your final poem, and then Zeina will close us out.
Sounds good. This is the anthology that we were talking about before, the Arlington
Beautiful.
Anthology. And I'm going to read from it because my poem is in here somewhere. And I like one of these poems because it's called Period, and it's about periods. And specifically the fact that in India, women are kind of restricted from contact with other people, as well as from performing tasks during the week that they do get their period. They're unable to engage with other family members. They're unable to kind of exist as a person in their household because of their like uncleanliness. And of course I took issue with this, and so I wanted to write a poem about it. The first time she watched blood pool on the bathroom floor, her mother makes a spoon of palms and carves out a map. Her words trickle like autumn, coloring her tongue a soft orange to make up for 4 feet of space between them. She squeezes warnings together with shaking thighs, nurses her breath to its constant, walks with a purpose she doesn't know, while averting her eyes, unlocking gaze with wooded panels, covered in layers of crime and guilt. Before passing over the sin-saken stage, mother tells her there are rules to follow. Don't poison the men with your gaze. Don't pray outside the discomfort of your prison. Don't touch the holy book, the very same that seizes your autonomy. Marinate in the darkness of your womanhood. Think about what you've done. Her hair is pulled back with plastic-wrapped hands and enough powder to color her scared white. She trails behind with hallowed hands, watches her life performed by a sterile actor as she dances lifelessly in time from the shadows. But the first time I watch blood pool on the bathroom floor, my mother closes the gap. Her arms wrap around my middle, her fingers swipe at my glistening cheeks. In her left hand is a hammer, ready to appease my itch to hurt the world that had hurt me. In her right is a Band-Aid, to piece together my broken fragments once again, covered in layers of pride and promise. Period isn't a word pressed to the ears, suction from the air. Period feels less like a halt and more like a pause, followed by a world that doesn't stop spinning. Instead, my arms still spring with flowers. My hair still whips with oceanic breeze. My body can make mountains move, tides pull, tectonic plates shift, and I still bleed without violence.
So powerful.
Thank you.
Zeina.
Sorry. Okay, I'm back. That was beautiful, Kashvi. Just so powerful. This poem is actually in my next book, which, as you said, Cathy, is coming out soon. It's called A Language for Colors. And it also has some Arabic in it, but I think within the context, you'll understand what those words mean. A language for colors. Asfar, she would say, pointing at a yellow tulip. And the color of grass, akhdar. My young daughter had mastered not only the colors, but also the throaty KH, 2 letters in English that equal 1 in Arabic. I would tell her it's the same sound as in khamse, khubz, sabanich, 5, bread, spinach, and my favorite name, Khalid, immortal. I once confessed to a friend wistfully that I would not call my son Khalid because Americans couldn't pronounce it. Now I wonder about such wisdom. Even my 8-year-old could constrict her throat muscles the right way to say Khalid, immortal like an ancient olive tree, a flame that never abates, a mother's love. This spring, I saw a patch of double hybrid tulips, asfar tinged with akhdar, and thought of my daughter's satisfied grin at learning those words thousands of miles away from her grandparents' home in Palestine. Here we are, hybrid Americans, living between 2 languages and speaking in colors, splendid flowers in a distant field.
Perfect way to close the day. Beautiful poem, incredible sounds and images.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that we invited both of you today together. It was a very well integrated conversation. It's nice to experience more of your poetry, both of you, and to hear it from your own voices, and just to get to know you better. We'll be posting a recording of this session on the YouTube channels at both Virginia Poetry Online, thanks to Bill Gloss, and Poetry Society of Virginia, thanks to Kathleen Decker. If you'd like to save the chat, do so now, especially you poets who might not have had a chance to see all the beautiful comments that are being made throughout the conversation. And Steve, you can now stop the recording.